Good morning. Welcome to the at-home version of the Ventura Vineyard. My name is Jeff, and I have the pleasure of acting as your service host today. I'm coming to you today from Sweet J, because the truth is, I miss you. I miss you a lot. And while we have no timetable for when we are going to be able to meet together in person, I can't wait for when that happens. And if I can't be with you, I wanted to come by and be in the room where we have spent a lot of time together. This is where our youth meet for the blend. We have done a lot of theater in here, and it's just a really great space that makes me feel at home, and I wanted to share that with you this morning. So, if you are new to us today, a very special welcome to you. We are glad that you found us, and we hope that you will feel at home here, and we hope that you will return. As your service host, it is my job to let you know about how the morning is going to go. After I am finished here, we are going to spend some time in worship through music from Chris and Ashley Gwaltney. Then we'll come back here. I will go over some announcements. We will have a very special video announcement this morning from our Mosaic team. And then we will turn it over to Richard Sochel, who is going to continue he's going to deliver our message this morning as we continue our series on the third way. After Richard is finished, we'll go back to Chris and Ashley for some more music. And then finally, we'll come back here and I will close out this portion of the service. But that is not it. There is special bonus content because after our service this morning, we encourage you to hop on over to Zoom, where we will spend some time together. It's a great opportunity. We can discuss the service. You can see some familiar faces and catch up. It's a time if you need special prayer. Whatever you need, we hope you'll join us on Zoom. And again, we hope you feel at home. So thank you for spending your Sunday morning with us. And without further ado, Chris and Ashley Gwaltney.
Oh, how high would I climb mountains if the mountains were where you hide? Oh, how far I'd scale the valleys if you grace the other side. Oh, how long have I chased rivers and lowly seas to where they rise against the rush of grace descending from the source of its supply. Or in the highlands and the heartache, you're neither more or less inclined. I would search and stop at nothing. You're just not that hard to find. Oh, how I praise you on the mountain. How I praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. I will praise you in the valleys all the same. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands and the heartache all the same. Oh, how far beneath your glory does your kindness extend the path from where your feet rest on the sunrise to where you sweep the sinners past. Oh, how fast would you come running if just to shadow me through the night? Trace my steps through all my failures and walk me out the other side. For who could dare ascend that mountain, the valley hill called Calvary? For the one I call Good Shepherd, who like a lamb was slain for me. Oh, how I praise you on the mountain, how I praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. I will praise you in the valleys all the same. No less God within the shadows, no less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands, in the heartache, come sing. Whoa, wherever I walk through, wherever I hear, you're making move mountains. Wherever I stand, if ever I walk through the valley of death, I sing through the shadow, my song will sing. Wherever I walk through, wherever I hear, you're making move mountains. Wherever I stand, if ever I walk through the valley of death, I sing through the shadow, my song will sing, my song will sing. Whoa, whoa, my song will sing. Whoa, whoa. From the greatest of all valleys come the pastures we call grace. Mighty river flowing upwards from a deep but empty grave. Oh, I will praise you on the mountain. Come on. I will praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. I will praise you in the valleys all the same. No less God within the shadows, no less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands and the heartache all the same.
At this time, I would like to draw your attention to our Ventura Vineyard app. It is a great way to find out about everything that's going on at the Ventura Vineyard. And one of those tiles that's on there has the word give. So if you click on that, that is a way for you to give electronically. We are so grateful to our community for your faithful giving during these times. Again, please check that out if you haven't been able to before. If you have any questions, please reach out to us through the app and somebody can let you know how it all works. So if you would, right now, please say a prayer with me for our offering. Father, we're so grateful that we have a chance to be together, even though we are physically apart. God, thank you that we are together in spirit. Please take our offerings and use them to advance your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen. So, you guys ready for some announcements? I know that you are. Guess what? The first one, super fun. September 19th, that's a Saturday night. It's back. Drive-in movie night is back. And this is not I mean, don't get me wrong. I had a really, really good time at the last drive-in we did. We watched The Never-Ending Story, which was very confusing for a lot of younger people, very nostalgic for some of us who are not so young. It was a really, really good time. But this time, bigger and better than ever, we're going to get together on September 19th and watch Mulan. And I don't mean the old 90s animated Mulan, which is fantastic. No, this is the brand new Mulan that came out last week. And we're going to watch it in the parking lot behind Ventura Vineyard on a 20-foot screen. Again, the last event was fantastic, but the screen was a little small. Well, not this time. We got a 20-foot screen. And let me tell you something about Mulan. If you happen to have checked the prices to rent Mulan, it ain't cheap. So guess what? Come see it with us on a 20-foot screen for free. That's right, for free. And there's even an opportunity for hot buttered real movie theater popcorn that we will order in advance. If you go to register on the app at Drive-In Movie, you can find out more information there. It's going to start at 8 p.m. Again, that's Saturday the 19th, 8 p.m. We encourage you to show up, however, at 7:30 to get the best spots. All right, it's first come, first served. You can watch the car, or you could watch the car. I guess you could do that, but it's not as fun as the movie. You can watch the movie in your car. You can listen through the stereo in your car, or if you want to get out of your car and stay with other members of your family, you're welcome to get out of the car and watch it there. So we're going to have sound. We're going to have a 20-foot screen. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's Mulan. That's going to be Saturday, September 19th, 7:30. So please check that out. Okay, what else do I have to tell you? One thing I want to tell you right now, I'll remind you of, is several weeks ago now, we sent out a survey. Our Mosaic team sent out a survey to get some of your thoughts on contemporary events and a lot of stuff that's going on. So now it's my pleasure to turn it over to members of the Mosaic team to let you know a little bit about the results of that survey and some of our plans going forward. So, Mosaic team, it's all you.
Hi, I'm Jen Herman. I'm a part of the Ventura Vineyard Mosaic team, along with the folks you see on the screen, and also Margie Harper. As a team, we've been looking and delving into the issues of racial division and also seeking to understand how racial reconciliation can be part of our country and our church. At the death of George Floyd several months ago, those issues came once again to the forefront, and we really felt it was important to understand better how the Ventura Vineyard community as a whole was grappling with the issues of racial division and injustice and violence. So we put together a survey, and we wanted to come today to look at that some more. The details will be down in a link below, but we're just giving you an overview right now. All right, I'm gonna hand this over to Linnea.
Before Michael tells you some of the details, I just wanted to pause and say thank you to all of you who took your time and who thoughtfully responded to the survey. Even more gratifying was the percentage of you who expressed a wholehearted interest. The bulk of responders made it clear their readiness to tackle God's formation of us into a community that actively repairs the brokenness in our society that racism has caused. We thank you all so much for all of your feedback. Our gratitude extends also to those of you who are not particularly interested in pursuing racial justice, and even those who might be opposed to it. We're committed to making every attempt to being open, non-judgmental, and to listen with agape love in full operation. Whether we agree with each other or not, we are family and value all of your input. Thank you so much. And here's Michael to give you some specifics.
Your response to the survey told us two things: what you want to know and how you want to go about learning it. First of all, 3 things you wanted to know. You wanted to know about social advocacy. Things like, what is an anti-racist? How do I learn to be an anti-racist? The second thing is the history of racism, basically the who, what, when, where, why, and how that we got to where we are racially in America right now. And the third thing is you wanted to include and learn about biblical perspective. What does the Bible teach us about God's will for our lives racially here in America? 3 things. And then you said 5 ways that you preferred to learn those things. First, guest speakers, debates, panel discussions. Secondly, movie nights with a facilitated discussion. A third way would be a co-worship service where we would join with in another church, primarily a church populated by people of color, and we would participate in a worship service with them. And then at another time, they would reciprocate and come and be our guests at the Ventura Vineyard. Fourth thing, focused on worship, would be to have our own unique worship services sometimes, like in late May, when using the Zoom process, the Mosaic team conducted or put on a worship service of lament, those kinds of things, maybe a silent vigil. And then the final thing would be book groups, book discussions, reading and talking about some of the really neat information that's out there today. That's it. 5 ways to learn the 3 areas of content you wanted to know so that we could promote racial healing. Now I'd like to turn it over to Kathy Navarro-Sochel.
Thank you, Michael. As you know, at the Ventura Vineyard, we've been talking a lot about the 3rd way. What is it and why is it so important? So in light of that, and because of the survey results, we have proposed that we would like to host a workshop on conflict and communication. We feel like it's really important to lay a foundation for being able to talk about these emotionally charged issues of race and institutional racism. Currently, we are looking at curriculum to help us to that end, and as soon as we know what that is, we will be in contact with our body, and you can sign up for that. Also, we have been in discussions with the leadership team at Ventura Vineyard to think about practical ways that we can be more intentional to pursue racial reconciliation and to figure out how to be true allies to churches of color, people of color that are sisters and brothers in Christ. Thank you again for taking the survey and for your patience in waiting for this information. We also wanted you to know that if you're interested in joining the Mosaic team, please reach out to us using the email contact@venturavineyard.org. Lastly, we just want to emphasize to you that as the Mosaic team of Ventura Vineyard, we are committed to prevailing in the 3rd way, whatever that looks like. We know, though, that our common Lord is with us. He is the core. He is the one we look to help us together choose to figure out how to confront racism in all of its forms. He's the one that gives us the ability to show the world that we are Christians by how we love one another. God bless you, and thanks again.
A very special thank you to Jen and Linnea and Michael and Kathy. And a thank you to those of you in our community that responded to that survey. We are looking forward to what comes next through the Mosaic team. They are some pretty special people. So thank you for all that you do. Quick reminder, after the service, please join us over on Zoom to talk about today's service and talk about whatever you want. The link is venturavineyard.org/Zoom. That's venturavineyard.org/Zoom, and there will be a graphic also at the end of the service as a reminder. So we hope to see you over there. Now I'd like to turn it over to Richard Sochel, who is continuing our series on the 3rd way.
Good morning, Ventura Vineyard family. So good to be here with you again. And if you're a visitor, thank you so much for being a part of our online service. I'm really glad that you're here with us. My name is Richard, and I'm a member of our teaching team, so I will be bringing us today's message, which is continuing our series, The Third Way. And this is a series that we've been in for several weeks, and we will conclude this series at the end of September. And so today I have the pleasure of talking with us about the third way in the context of Christian community, how we get along with one another, or perhaps how we don't get along with one another. And I'm going to be utilizing some of our lectionary readings to be the focus texts for today's message. Now, before I get into the message, which I have titled Freedom for Love and Unity, I am always up for a challenge. And a few weeks ago, one member of our community challenged the teaching team to work into the message something about artichokes. And so I'm going to do that today. I am going to tell you an artichoke joke. So here's the joke. So Mr. and Mrs. Artichoke, very much in love. And on a bright, sunny Saturday afternoon, they were strolling down the boulevard. Suddenly, a delivery truck had a blowout. It lost control. It careened across all the lanes. It hopped up onto the curb and it flattened Mr. Artichoke. It was a terrible accident. The ambulance came. The EMTs were able to resuscitate Mr. Artichoke. They put him in the ambulance and Mrs. Artichoke rode with him. When they got to the emergency room, they rushed Mr. Artichoke in for emergency surgery. Mrs. Artichoke waited in the waiting room 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. Finally, the surgeon came out, pulling down his mask. He said, "Can we sit down? I would like to talk with you. I have some good news and I have some bad news." "Okay," said Mrs. Artichoke. "What's the good news?" "Well, the good news," the surgeon said, "is that your husband is a fighter. He is a champ. He is gonna make it. He will live." And Mrs. Artichoke, again, brushing away the tears. "And what's the bad news?" "Well, the bad news is that he's going to be a vegetable for the rest of his life." I think I heard some groaning. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and begin this message in earnest, get to the meat and potatoes of it all. And to begin with, I'm going to have a reading from one of our lectionary texts. It's Romans chapter 14, verses 1 through 5. This is from the Message version, and Kelsey is going to read that for us. So thank you, Kelsey.
Hey friends, so I get the honor of reading one of our passages for today. I'm going to go ahead and read for us Romans 14, verses 1 through 5. It says, "Welcome with open arms, fellow believers who don't see things the way you do. And don't jump all over them every time they do or say something you don't agree with. Even when it seems they are strong on opinions but weak in the faith department. Remember, they have their own history to deal with. Treat them gently. For instance, a person who has been around for a while might well be convinced that he can eat anything on the table, while another with a different background might assume he should only be a vegetarian and eat accordingly. But since both are guests at Christ's table, wouldn't it be terribly rude if they fell to criticizing what the other ate or didn't eat? God, after all, invited them both to the table. Do you have any business crossing people off the guest list or interfering with God's welcome? If there are corrections to be made or manners to be learned, God can handle that without your help. Or say one person thinks that Sundays should be set aside as holy, and another thinks that each day is pretty much like any other. There are good reasons either way, so each person is free to follow the convictions of conscience."
So if you've been in a Christian community for about 5 minutes, you realize that, hey, this is kind of tough and it's challenging. You know, we tend to judge and criticize one another, and we divide and we split. You know, perhaps you were part of a church that split, or maybe you were part of a church that ended because of conflict, or you experienced some deep wounding because you felt like you failed to live up to someone's standards. So instead of love and unity, your church was full of division and disunity. So love and unity, it is the main thing when it comes to living in church community. And on Jesus' last night, with his followers before he was tortured and killed. He prayed for them, and he prayed that they would love one another and that they would be united. Those prayers are recorded in the Gospel of John in chapters 14 and 15. And furthermore, Jesus declared, "So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." John 8:36. So here's the big problem. In many Christian communities, legalism is the default. Legalism is the safest approach to life together. However, legalism creates a false sense of safety and it harms relationships. In the end, legalism is not safe because the natural outcomes of legalism are judgment and condescension. And these negative attitudes, they break down relationships. And what follows then is division and disunity. Division over time, and in the extreme, becomes sectarianism. Now, I don't think that legalism is a particular problem in our community, but I am saying that it is the source of a lot of tension and conflict within Christian circles, within Christian relationships. Now, the opposite extreme is that there are no limits. Anything goes, do anything you want, no restraints, no repression. That's called antinomianism, and that's also incorrect and destructive. So here's my point, and this does come out of our lectionary passages for today, and here it is. So the third way means that in Christ, we are liberated. We are free to live according to our convictions, rather than being forced to convict people that live differently than us. In Jesus, the commandments to love God and love our neighbor become the promises of true freedom. Love and unity will be the result. With consent, we will freely love God and others as ourselves, and not because we are required to. So the way forward is the third way. So can you see? Legalism is binary. It's either right or wrong, in or out. It's binary. But there is a third way, the way of Jesus, the way of shalom. The third way is promising, and I'm excited to be part of it, and I'm excited to talk about it with us this morning. So now, let's unpack that point in the time that we have together, keeping in mind that we're going to stay anchored in these texts and that we are also committed to living the third way. So we just read Romans 14, verses 1 through 5. And in the book of Romans, Paul is writing to a group of people that he's never met, probably in the mid-50s AD. He is writing to some folks that he has heard about through reputation. He actually has met a couple of people that are there, but he's never been to the community, as was typical for Paul as he was doing his missionary journeys and travels and building the early church. So Paul was formerly called Saul of Tarsus. He was a rabbinic student. He was a Pharisee. He was well educated in theology and religion and philosophy. And he was a fanatic. He was a fanatic for Judaism, to the extent that he was overseeing incarcerations and even murder of people who were following Jesus, the Messiah. Now, we also know that this is Rome. This is the capital city of the largest empire the world had ever seen to date. And we know that it was a mixed audience. There were both Jews and non-Jews there. And something had happened a few years before Paul writes his letter. In AD 49, the Emperor Claudius had exiled all of the Jews from Rome. Several years later, they were allowed to return. So in the meantime, these early churches then had no Jewish leadership. Leadership then was assumed by non-Jewish believers, and so it became less and less Jewish. And so as Jews are returning, there's a bunch of conflict and tension. They're quarreling about what we should do and what we should not do. What are the behavioral norms? What is considered spiritual and what is considered unspiritual? And they were getting it all wrong. And so Paul, in his letter, these previous 13 chapters, is really laying it all out theologically. This particular book is, it's complicated, it's very theological, and it's a masterpiece. It's actually a brilliant piece of work, and we are very, very fortunate that it is part of our scripture that that we can turn to for understanding about what this Christian life is all about. But when we get to chapter 14, this is really just the practical stuff of living. It's not anything heavy. It's not anything ultra theological. It's just about getting along. And there was a lot of not getting along at this particular time when Paul's writing the letter. So these differences, disparate norms, became significant in the relationships there, and that's why Paul is writing these admonitions. So eat meat or don't eat meat, celebrate a special day, don't celebrate a special day. Those quarrels showed that the focus had really moved from the main thing, love and unity, the centrality of the risen Jesus, the Son of God, the Messiah, and these peripheral things had become central things. So essential elements of life and faith had moved from the periphery to the center, and the result was condescension, judgment, and division. So differences in the Roman church community were comprised by a couple of things. One was this ethnic pride, particularly from the Jewish believers, and moral superiority. So moral superiority of one group over the other. And of course, pride and superiority, these themes are all too familiar in our environment all around us. And in Rome, one group was judging the other with this hubris. Jews felt that they were better than non-Jews because, after all, God had chosen them. They were from the family of Abraham. They were physical descendants. They had the law. They had the prophets. And therefore, they were favored. So obviously, everybody else needs to conform and get in line and do what they're doing. Now, Paul, earlier in the book of Romans, says, wait, hang on just a second, guys. There is no moral superiority. So yeah, you might be part of this tree naturally, or you might be grafted in as with the Gentiles, those non-Jewish believers. But it's, hey, we're part of the same tree. It's the same root. Now, here's just a quick example, I think, that kind of helps illustrate the point. So let's say that, I think you would agree with me that speeding is against the law, right? You're breaking the rules. Now, I know some of you have lead feet, so I know this is like going to hit you right square in the chest. But speeding, I don't think anyone would disagree that that's against the law or breaking the law if you speed. If, for example, you are driving through a school zone, the speed limit in a school zone is 25 miles per hour. It makes sense to slow down. There's children present. There could be a terrible accident like Mr. Artichoke. So we don't want that. So let's just say, for example, that Caltrans is going to resurface this road in front of the school. So they take down all the signage that says what the speed limit is, all of the paints and the striping, it's all wiped away. They come in, they put in a fresh, new asphalt surface, and before the painting crew comes in, driver number one, he drives through there at 50 miles per hour. So obviously, he exceeded the speed limit. He broke the rule. Now the following day, the paint crew comes back. They put up all the signage. All of the lines are painted back on the street. And driver number two, he decides to drive 50 miles an hour through the school zone. But of course, he's aware that he is breaking the law. So both drivers, driver number one and driver number two, have broken the law, right? Which one of those drivers do you think is more culpable, more guilty? Driver number two, of course, because driver number two knew better. Driver number one probably went through there and never even knew that he had done anything wrong. And so this is the argument that Paul is making for the Jews, and he's saying, hey guys, before you get up on your high horse, you have to understand that, yeah, you guys had the rules, but you broke them anyway. So if anything, you're not morally superior to your non-Jewish brothers and sisters. And so Basically, that's the point Paul makes earlier in the book of Romans, that, hey, we've all sinned, we've all fallen short of the glory of God, and we're all on equal footing. So the other side of this is that in Paul's admonitions, he's saying, guys, we have this point of community, which is to love and to be united. So how do we live out the greatest commandment when we are a diverse community? Well, we need to love one another and we need to be unified. So why are we fighting about the small stuff? And although it may not feel like the small stuff, it's unkind and it's divisive. So rather, the good news is that when we root ourselves in the promise of freedom that culminated in the risen Jesus, the commandment becomes a promise because we will actually want to do it. It won't be something that we are buffing up or railing against. We will want to do it. And so they will know we are Christians by our love. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. John 13:35. So here, Paul is helping the Roman churches see that because of this tremendous freedom that they can experience in Christ, they are completely free. Paul wrote this in Galatians 5:1, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." So this word freedom, it can also be understood as salvation. Paul wrote also earlier in Romans that observance of the law is really not the way to salvation. Rather, it is by grace through faith that we are saved. But in the Bible, freedom and salvation, they're bound together because to be saved means to have the opportunity for freedom. And so we can trace this link of salvation and freedom back to the Exodus story. So in Exodus, Israel is saved from the oppression of the Egyptians. They are saved from the oppression of Egypt for freedom. So the Exodus story, it's a freedom story. The Exodus theme, it's repeated throughout the biblical narrative because it is a part of the core dimension of God's larger plan of salvation. So let's go back a few thousand years and look at this ancient story of Israel in the book of Exodus. And this is another one of our lectionary texts for this Sunday. So it's Exodus chapter 14. And in this chapter, the Hebrew word yasha is used to describe what God did for the Israelites when they crossed the Red Sea. So he liberated them from slavery in Egypt. And at the climax of this Exodus story, God miraculously saves the Israelite tribes from the hand of Egypt. And the word yasha is used to describe what happened. So let's read Exodus 14, verses 30 and 31. So that day the Lord saved, that's the Hebrew word yasha, Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. So yasha is translated saved. It is also a verb that means delivered. It doesn't mean delivered like your Amazon package or a piece of mail. Rather, delivered is translated into English as possibly rescued, helped, or liberated. So all of these meanings are interrelated. Freedom, it's an important value in our culture. We readily accept it, but what does it really mean? What does freedom mean? In our common understanding, it means to be unrestrained, unfettered, to be able to do, think, and say what you want to do without restriction. But biblical freedom is different from this common meaning. So as I was exploring the idea of freedom, looking here at this Exodus passage, actually the whole chapter 14 tells the story, I found something I would like to share with us. And what I found is that freedom has two dimensions, at least two. And these two dimensions involve two different prepositions, from and for. So freedom from and freedom for. So the freedom from side is something that God does, right? So the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. That's Exodus 14:14. So freedom from, it's the freedom from slavery. It's freedom from the past. It's freedom from the pain and the failures of our backstories. And freedom for, freedom to is what comes after. And it's largely what we do. It's what we do in union with Christ in community. And it's done by consent. In other words, we choose it, and the main choices before us are love and unity. Jesus' prayer. So a united and loving, diverse community, it will be surprising because we don't see it very often. We don't see it other places. And thus the witness of the gospel will be seen and experienced by those outside the community who, while looking at it, they're wondering, wow, that looks pretty good. I'd like to be a part of it. And so that expression, it's a voice without words. It's a miracle of shalom in the midst of conflicts and divisions that are all around us. And this is true church, the united community of lovers, shepherds, and prophets. So it would be a mistake, obviously, to say that all Christians are good at love and unity, or that we're really good at it at all. That's obviously false. And there is conflict everywhere in the church, just as well as outside, and believers attacking and defaming, criticizing others. And it's sad. And why is that? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think legalism is one major reason for that. And perhaps part of the reason is that, legalism, it offers this false sense of safety because we kind of know where the boundaries are. If we're sailing our boat out in the harbor, we'd like to know where the reef is before we run up on it. And what was happening here in the Roman context, we see that in other contexts too, is that the non-essential are thought to be essential. There's difficulty with teasing out, what's a tradition, what's culture, and what's a vital boundary or a vital doctrine. And they were having trouble differentiating that. Had to do with what you ate, or what days you celebrated or didn't celebrated, things like that. And we have a kind of an uphill battle with demonstrating true love and unity with each other, because the human ego, man, it craves safety and protection, and it doesn't seem to be able to tolerate differences very well. So that's why I think legalism can feel so natural. And then at the same time, we're rebellious sons and daughters, which is kind of ironic. Some of you are rebels without a cause. I know you. So restraint and self-control for the sake of others is very loving. And so Paul says it this way in 1 Corinthians 8:13. Therefore, if what I eat causes my brother or sister to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again, so that I will not cause them to fall. So what's this deal about meat? Well, the thing is, in the ancient world, they didn't have grocery stores and butcher shops. So if you're going to eat meat, you had to go down to the local temple and get your meat there. And that was an animal that had been slaughtered ritually for pagan worship. So it could be a stumbling block for people, And of course, as we know, the Jews had the law, and so they had dietary restrictions, and they had a calendar, etc. And so when people were kind of bumping up or rubbing up against that, it could actually cause them to stumble. And so Paul makes this point in the 5th verse of Romans 14. He says this: each person is free to follow the convictions of conscience. And that's another thing that it creates some anxiety, because we like to know this is right or this is wrong. We don't really like to have any gray in the middle, but that is the third way, guys. It's a non-binary way. And so we have this thing called conscience, and we have convictions, and we should live according to them, according to Paul. So I wanted to just illustrate a story, or illustrate with a story. Eric Liddell, he was a Scottish man. He was actually born in China in 1902, and he became an Olympic runner. He competed in the 1924 Olympic Games, and he was also a devout Christian. Now, the running part, the athletic Olympic part of his story is told in the 1981 film Chariots of Fire, which did win 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. So Eric, by the time he was about 20, was one of the fastest men in the world. And so he was favored in the 1924 Summer Olympic Games in Paris to win the 100-meter sprint. There was a problem, though. That particular event was held on a Sunday, and for Eric, that was the Sabbath, and it went against his conviction and his conscience to run a race on the Sabbath. And so despite tremendous amounts of pressure from his teammates and from coaches and even the Prince of England to go ahead and still run the event, he chose to stand by his convictions and he did not run. Now, he did end up winning another gold medal, or a gold medal with another event, the 400 meters, and so he did have that honor and that distinct privilege. But I just was really inspired by his story because he, at great personal cost, stuck by his convictions. And whether you agree with that or not, I mean, for us now, probably the Sabbath is no big deal. But for him, it was. And he stood by what he believed was right, even at great personal cost. Eventually, he went to serve as a missionary in China, and he was incarcerated and put into a civilian internment camp when the Japanese invaded China, and he died there in 1945. So just another quick story to illustrate how this third way of Christian living can be somewhat nuanced with regards to our choices and our actions. I have a personal story to share. So Kathy and I, many years ago, we had some friends that lived up the street, and they were a Christian couple. And they invited us over for dinner one night, and so we went, and we had a nice time. My friend said, hey, you know, I have something I want to show you. I have this cool new video game. And so he brought me into his room, and he was playing a game called Doom. Some of you remember Doom. It's been around for a while. And essentially, it's a shooter, and you are you are shooting underworld monsters in great quantities. It's very gory. It's very violent, and it's brutal. So, you know, just for example, one of the weapons you have is a chainsaw. So you get the idea. And he was playing this game, and I was kind of fascinated by it. And then at one point, he said, hey, do you want to play? And I was kind of like ready to jump in, and I just had this little check inside, and I was like, no, I'll just watch. And so anyway, we finished the evening, and I went home, and I just remember I was just feeling kind of frustrated and annoyed with God because I sort of had this check in my conscience that I shouldn't do that. And so I was kind of having a teenage tantrum, and I was like just telling God, you know, well, why does he get to do it and I don't get to do it, and that's not fair, and you know, just And so I did decide to pray in earnest about it. And so I simply, in prayer, I asked the Lord, I said, why can he do that and I can't? You know, and I got the little still small voice inside of me said, because his calling is different than yours. And that made perfect sense to me. I was like, okay. Like A, I was really excited that I heard from God. And B, I was like, you know what, that totally makes sense to me. And I was satisfied with that because he was different than me. So, you know, his calling and his place in the kingdom was different than mine. And so for him, it was okay. And for me, it wasn't okay. And I was cool with that. So, you know, I think that has a lot to do with what Paul is saying here is, you know, don't sweat the small stuff. It's the big stuff. So there's this thing, right? So we have an uphill battle, and it has to do with some psychology going on with us. And I did a little research and reading into it, and there's this thing that we have. It's called reactance, right? And so just to give an example, again, a personal example of how that works is we have dinner together as a family every night. And I'm really proud of our little family for doing that. We read in some parenting magazine, you know, years and years ago that if you can get together and have an evening meal together, it's really good for your communication and your relationship as a family. And so we've done that over the years, and we continue that. Even now, our kids are grown and they're adults, so they live in the house with us, but we still have dinner together every night. And so one of the patterns is that Kathy usually cooks, and then when she's getting ready to serve, she says, "Hey, Richard, can you call the kids down for dinner?" And every time she asks me to do that, well, actually, she tells me to do it. Every time she tells me to do that, I have this little physical reaction. It's right below my rib cage, and it goes like this. So it's a little, it has a sound and it has a feeling, and it's right there in the pit of my stomach. And that little has a name. It's called reactance. Reactance, and here's the definition. Reactance is an unpleasant motivational arousal that emerges when people experience a threat or loss to their free behaviors. It serves as a motivator to restore one's freedom. The amount of reactance depends on the importance of the threatened freedom and the perceived magnitude of the threat. People who are threatened usually feel uncomfortable, hostile, aggressive, and angry. That's J.W. Brehm, written in 1966, A Theory of Psychological Reactance. So imagine how I would feel if there was a real threat to my freedom. But I'm just one of those people. I just don't like to be told what to do, and I don't like to be told what not to do, and I have a feeling a few of you are like that too. Now, another problem is that when we do have disagreement, it's a little bit different, but in terms of disagreement, it also feels really personal. It feels like an attack or a loss of reputation. So there's this really smart guy. His name is Mark Leary, and he is a neuroscientist at Duke University, and he puts it this way. Now, although on the surface, disagreement is simply about the merits of some fact or opinion, another message often lurks just beneath the surface. Being disagreed with often conveys that the other person thinks that we're stupid, misinformed, irrational, biased, narrow-minded, or, in the case of religious and political topics, morally misguided or downright evil. Mark Leary, PhD, professor of psychology and neuroscience at Duke University. So we have a lot of factors and issues working against us when it comes to getting along, when it comes to loving each other and being united. But we have many supports in place. First, knowing that we're loved by God, just as we are, and not as we should be. Knowing that we have already come a long way. We've been saved, we've been helped, and we've been rescued from our past. And that we have a promise of freedom. Freedom to be loved and to unite. And we have practical tools in our interpersonal toolkit. And one of those tools is just being willing to listen. And our Mosaic team is going to help us with that as a community. They're going to be bringing something to us very soon. So stay tuned for that. So finally, with respect to this commitment to love one another, to this commitment to anti-legalism, the third way, as we love and unify in the freedom that we have in Jesus, I have a final text from Paul. This is at the end of Romans 14. Romans 14, 22 and 23, and this is from the NIV. Cultivate your own relationship with God, but don't impose it on others. You're fortunate if your behavior and your belief are coherent. But if you're not sure, if you notice that you are acting in ways inconsistent with what you believe, some days trying to impose your opinions on others, other days trying to please them, then you know that you are out of line. If the way you live isn't consistent with what you believe, then it's wrong. So that's Romans 14, 22 and 23. So choosing to love and to unify, it will be challenging for us. It will be challenging for us at the Ventura Vineyard and for every Christian community. Conflict and disagreements are ahead, but we don't have to be disagreeable. We are diverse peoples and we're interacting with one another in the third way. And in our divisive situations, we need a life of prayer. So I'd like us to end with a prayer for reconciliation. And this comes to us from the Corrymeela community in Northern Ireland. Corrymeela has been a center for peace and reconciliation for more than 50 years. including during the height of the Troubles. And that was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in the Northern Ireland context. And so these brothers and sisters, they know well the devastation of sectarian conflicts. And Kathy and I had the unique privilege of spending a few days there at Corrymeela with both Catholic and Protestant students from Ireland and the UK in the late 80s. And this was 10 years before the 1998 Good Friday Agreement was signed. So this is a prayer for reconciliation from the Corrymeela community, and we will end with this. So pray with me, would you? A prayer for reconciliation. Where there is separation, there is pain. And where there is pain, there is story. And where there is story, there is understanding and misunderstanding, listening and not listening. May we, separated peoples, estranged strangers, unfriended families, divided communities, turn toward each other and turn toward our stories with understanding and listening, with argument and acceptance, with challenge, change, and consolation. Because if God is to be found, God will be found in the space between. Amen.
You heard the cry of our hearts, and you came down. Freely you gave us your love. Showing us how. Make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is darkness, let me shine light. And may your love cause us to open up, cause us to open up our hearts. May your light cause us to shine so bright that we bring hope into the dark. All that we do without love it means nothing. Grant us the courage to give. As your calling, make me an instrument of your peace. for the hopeless. Your love is strengthen our weakness. Your love is. May we love as you know. Hope for the hopeless. Your love is strengthen our weakness. Your love is. May we love as you know. 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 Beautifully made by nature, I fall. By grace, I've been raised. You're calling me, I'm coming home. You're calling me, I'm coming home. Beautifully made by nature, I fall. By grace, I've been raised. You're calling me, I'm coming home. You're calling me, I'm coming home. We are no longer strangers to your arms. We We are no longer strangers to your arms. By your grace, you have saved us. We're no longer strangers. We're no longer strangers to your arms.
And that's going to wrap it up for this portion of our Sunday service. Thank you to everybody involved for making this happen, and thank you for joining us and spending your Sunday with us. But as a reminder, this isn't the end. Please hop over right now to venturavineyard.org/Zoom, and we look forward to catching up with you there. If we do miss you over there, we look forward to seeing you next week, and I can't wait to see you on the 19th for Mulan. So long from Sweet Jay and the Ventura Vineyard. Take care.